I remember in more or less my last week at Cambridge having coffee in a cafe with a couple of friends, and one of them saying to me, "Well, I hear you're going to work for King Goldfinger, James." And I said, "Yes," blithely, and they looked at one another nervously, as though I hardly knew what I was what I was letting myself in for. In retrospect, it reminds me rather of that scene in Dracula where the young solicitor Harker tells the peasants in the inn in Transylvania that he's going to visit Count Dracula, and they look at one another askance, but won't tell him quite what it is that they fear. In the event, I came to work in Dracula's castle, i.e. Trellick Tower, and survived to find my way out in due course.
I first moved here in 1972, got out of the car, stood on the pavement, looked up at Trellick Tower, clutching my daughter in my hand, and I said, "Wow, what a great building! I love the height of this building and the clear-cut lines." I said, "This is a modern building, and this will go with me. I love modern things." So with that, we moved in and it became our home. And that first year is 1972, the Christmas of 1972. Someone opened a fire hydrant on the landing, flooded out all the lifts, so it was a complete darkness. The whole building had no lights. Things really started to go downhill after that.
Trellick Tower was always kind of part of the skyline when we were younger, and walking from school we used to look up and think Trellick was falling down. But not only that, it had its stories about people being murdered and killed, and it was quite a grim building. In fact, it was quite scary. So we would dare, as kids, we would dare each other to come all the way to the top, look out the window, and then make our way back down. But whilst we were being egged on, it's always, the ghost's going to get you. So, that was my kind of the picture that I have in my mind about Trellick Tower.
You could say that Goldfinger was one of these people for whom they say he didn't suffer fools gladly. He was an impatient man, and he was very, very quick-minded. On the other hand, his thought processes were rather different from most people's. He sort of took leaps from one idea to the next, and he made no bones about telling you that you were a fool or whatever for not being able to keep up with him.
We had a second child, so we needed a bigger flat, and having been in here, I was familiar with the size of the flats, and I loved the view and the fact of being up high, and just the flats really appealed to me. At the time, you just hear all sorts of things, like there's people within the building living here who'd even go up a floor or two and rob their neighbours, and things never really left the building. Flats got robbed and things didn't seem to leave, and likewise, reportedly, people wouldn't deliver to the building because if you had a TV or white goods, it may get jacked halfway up the lift. It would never make it to the door. So it kind of had this reputation previous to me coming here.
It's amazing what reaction you get from people when you tell them you live in Trellick Tower. For instance, I was at a function at the town hall, and one lady turned and asked me, "Where do you live, Lee?" And I said, "Oh, I live in Trellick Tower." And you can see the reaction on her face. "Oh." And I thought, right, I got you. I never spoke to her after that.
Even when I drink coffee down the road at the weekend, you have a lot of tourists and stuff, and you just be sitting there and you hear people at the next table just expressing their opinion, and some shake their head like you just see the two different energies. You know, some are appalled by it, and so it marks everyone. People come up Portobello, the tourists in particular, and they'll stumble on to Goulburn Road, and then they'll see Trellick, and they'll be like, come here, look, come here. So it does engage everyone who sees it, and it's perspective too at the end of the street. It really fits in. It looks well.
A particle is snatched from space and rhythmically modulated from the surrounding chaos. That is architecture. So for him, architecture was to get to define a part of the space, which is chaos. He always said that it was the architect's job to create the house and for the occupants to create the home. In other words, he created the setting, but others had to provide the life within it, you know.
I moved here just before Christmas of 1977, and I actually got it from the then GLC, because they had the so-called amnesty for squatters. They give you one offer, take it or leave it. I had a very good squat that turned into a sort of a thing that the GLC said I could stay in. The whole street was like that, Latimer Road. So it was a toss-up between this place paying a bit of rent and that place paying just service charges. Well, this place is a lot nicer and a permanency to it. You know, a squat situation won't last forever. So of course I took it. I'm a motorbiker and also mostly these days a cyclist. You have this sort of open space feeling when you're motorbiking and cycling. It's, you know, boxed in. Now there's a certain aspect of that when you get when you're inside Trellick Tower, especially since there's no other big buildings in the way. With one exception, you're not moving that much, so you can spend more time examining the view.
I love heights. The higher I go is the better for me. I love heights. When I was growing up in the country where I came from, my mother had a hard time to keep me underground because I used to climb trees. This building and I go back a long way. As you appreciate, I came to live here in 1972, and we've lived here all that time. And I love the building like nobody could love this building. So I do get mad when people say this and that about Trellick Tower, and I mumble to myself, oh, shut up, you don't live there. And I often tell people that please don't criticize this building. You haven't been inside the building. You don't know what the apartment looks like. So can you please don't say anything until you come in to look at it.
You know, I didn't think that anybody who could build buildings as powerful as that was going to be just like that. The man next door, you know, the clubbable. I mean, that's the sort of English vice, you know, that everybody has to be a jolly decent chap, and so you get jolly decent architecture, and you don't get anything with a kick in it. I remember in an interview he had with a Hungarian TV company shortly before he died, and he said, in 100 years, no one will know whether I was a good architect or not, because everything will have been destroyed. But at other times, he would place himself, you know, in the same league as Michelangelo. So, you know, like most people, he wasn't entirely consistent or logical. But his values in architecture were very soundly based. They weren't based on a desire to express himself. They were based on a very close study of the well-being of the people who used his buildings.